All right, this is our last video on our sourdough starter. So, this is how to prepare your starter if you need to put it to sleep for just some period of time. You're done working with it and you don't really cook with it as much as you wanted, but you don't really want all that work to go to waste. So, this is how you would keep it for long-term storage where you're willing to work at it a little bit to get it woke back up. So what we're going to be doing is, it might have seemed just a smidge confusing why I included the live sourdough starter and the flake sourdough starter way at the beginning in that one of the, I think it was the second sourdough video, when we did those 3 competing little starters, and then we ended up using the one that you guys had to use, which was the commercial yeast. Well, that was because you can give to a friend some live starter and they can make their own starter from that, or you can do this, and this is how you make your own starter flakes. So this is Barbara. Barbara and I have been cooking together a lot this summer, but I actually have another starter that I would like to work with that I started along with you guys that just has a slightly different flavor, because it's just like, the starter is a living thing just like anything else. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your starter is freshly fed. So I fed Barbara last night. And I'm filming this in the evening, so you could see there was just like one little bubble of hooch on top. But that's okay. So I'm just stirring it up to get it kind of even. And then what we're going to do is, here I have a cookie sheet that is covered in a silicone baking mat. This silicone baking mat is non-stick and is going to make sure that we don't get the starter stuck to it. And what'll happen is, once we spread the starter around on here, it's gonna dry, and once it is fully dried, then all you have to do is bend this, and you can break off that big sheet of sourdough starter. And then probably the cleanest way to do it that I've done is take the big sheet and kind of like fold it in half and put it in a gallon-sized plastic bag, break it up into chips, and then you can put it into a mason jar, and you will get flakes like these. So you can see in there those flakes of sourdough. And all you have to do is take a scoop of those flakes, just like we did on that first video, and then you would do kind of the directions like we did for week 1. So 2 tablespoons flour, 2 tablespoons distilled or chlorine-free water, and in the morning, stir at night, and you do that for a week just to get everything up and going, and then you could treat it like your old starter. And if you want to keep your starter alive, the other thing is you don't just have to feed it with tablespoons. You can just start filling it up, and if you know the consistency you're going for, you know, well, how thick it should be, you don't really even have to measure anymore. You just put the right amount of flour and water until it's the right thickness. And remember, you always kind of want to run your jar at about half full. Okay, so let's get after it here. I'm just going to pour some on. That's kind of a lot, but that'll be okay. It'll just take a little bit longer to dry, but that's okay. So here we're just going to spread this out nice and even over our whole silicone mat. And then you're going to want to put it somewhere where it's going to be undisturbed. So if you're like me and you have cats that would instantly have their paw prints in this and then track it all over the house, what I am going to do is, it is somewhat of a risky procedure, but I will be putting this in the oven with just the light on. So no heat, just the light on, and that will help it dry out. However, I am going to have to put a oven mitt in just the edge of the door to remind myself, don't preheat the oven and start baking something, because you'll kill this. So make sure that you remind yourself somehow, put a sticky note over the controls or something to stop you from accidentally turning on the oven. And that would be the cats chasing each other. Oh, they love ruining my videos. It's the best. All right. That's about as good as we're going to get. So, I'm going to go ahead, turn the oven light on, pop it in. And with it being just a little bit on the thick side, that might take a day or two. But remember, we talked a little bit about how to put your starter into fridge mode last week on our last sourdough video, and you can leave your starter in fridge mode for a very long time. They really, I suggested a month just because I don't want to lead you astray and get you in a bad situation where you're expecting it to be able to make stuff and it will fail you. But honest to God, I've had a sourdough starter that actually was when I started Barbara that I literally have not fed or done anything with since I actually made these flakes, and it's still in the back of my fridge, and if I fed that thing for maybe 3 days in a row, it would come back. The biggest thing is you got to make sure they don't dry out. If they dry out, they'll die. Also, if they completely run out of food, so if the bacteria completely run out of food, like you leave them out on the counter where it's warm, they will die there as well. But I'm going to be real honest. It's not best practice, and I'm not sure how good the old Barbara that's not this Barbara, but the Barbara that's way in the back of my fridge, I'm not sure how good it's doing still, but I bet it'd still work. I bet it'd still work. So you do not have to baby these. You can severely neglect them, especially after you have built them up for several weeks like we have. They get pretty strong, and it's pretty hard to kill a sourdough starter. The one way you can kill it, though, is there are some people that in the winter, they will go ahead and they will put their sourdough starter jar like this in their oven with the light on to try and incubate it because their house is cold, and then they'll preheat their oven. If you cook them to death, they'll die. That's for sure. So that is our last little tidbit of information about our sourdough starter, how to preserve it yourself. And just remember, share. If somebody feels like maybe you want to share a recipe with them or something like that, please feel free to. I mean, you can give them, if you've got quite a bit in your jar, you can give them a whole cup and then they can just add another cup to it and they'll be baking overnight. Or you could give them a couple tablespoons and they could work with it for a couple of days and get it up and going. Or maybe you just make some flakes and you want to start up your sourdough in a year or two. These last almost for eternity, and you don't even have to worry about these. I worry a little bit about Barbara in the back of the fridge. These, basically forever. And that's it. I hope you have enjoyed our little impromptu COVID-19 lab experience. It's not the most conventional thing, but I really do hope that this encourages you to kind of experiment with some cooking some stuff in your home. And now that you've got a sourdough starter, there's lots of cool sourdough recipes that you can use that really are great. And something interesting, just a random fact about sourdough, is items that you make with sourdough compared to other homemade items, they tend to last longer. They tend to resist getting moldy or stale a lot better. So they'll last, I'm not going to say way longer, but a pretty noticeable amount longer just because of all the good bacteria and the changes that sourdough culture made to the starter that is in here, and the changes that the dough undergoes because it has to incubate for several hours. It changes the way the bread acts a little bit. So, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you at the wrap-up video, I guess.